May 3, 2015. The morning fog still clung to the hills of Sullivan County when Officer James Ryder arrived at Fox Hollow Rescue Farm. The call had come in at 5:43 a.m., unusual for a Sunday, from a part-time worker who'd arrived early to feed the animals. James had known Fox Hollow his entire career. The small animal rescue sat on 15 acres of rolling Tennessee countryside, a collection of weathered buildings that had once been a working farm. For 22 years, Dennis Maurer had operated it as a sanctuary for unwanted pets and livestock. The community respected him for it, even if rumors occasionally surfaced about his temper or financial practices. The squad car's tires crunched on gravel as James pulled up behind the animal control van. Dawn was breaking over the eastern ridge, casting long shadows across the property. As he stepped out, the distinctive smell of hay and animal feed mingled with something metallic that made his stomach tighten. "Over here," called Marcia Wilkins, the senior animal control officer. Her face was drawn, eyes narrowed against the emerging sunlight. "Found him about 20 minutes ago. Door was chained from outside." The kennel building was a long, rectangular structure with a metal roof. 6 chain-link runs extended from its side, empty now in the early morning light. James noted the padlock hanging open on the gate, standard issue, nothing special. "Any signs of forced entry?" James asked, pulling latex gloves from his pocket. "None that I can see," Marcia replied. "Whoever did this either had a key or Dennis let them in." They walked toward the chained gate. Beyond it, the kennel door stood ajar, revealing darkness within. James removed the chain, noting its relatively new condition, and approached the entrance. The smell hit him first, copper and waste. He flicked on his flashlight, sweeping the beam across the concrete floor. The dogs were all secured in their separate runs, surprisingly quiet. They watched the officers with wary eyes, tails low. "Jesus," James muttered as his light found Dennis Maurer. The 62-year-old lay face down between 2 cages, surrounded by a congealing pool of blood. Beside him was a metal grain scoop, its edge dented and dark with dried blood. Dennis's gray hair was matted red at the back of his skull. "Time of death?" James asked, crouching to examine the scene without touching anything. "Hard to say exactly," Marcia replied, "but rigor is well established. My guess is sometime overnight. The worker who found him says she stopped by around 9:30 last night to drop off medication for one of the dogs. Dennis was here alone, said he was waiting for someone but didn't mention who." James nodded, scanning the room. "What about the dogs? Any signs they were agitated?" "That's the thing," Marcia said, gesturing toward the kennels. "They're calm. Too calm for having spent the night locked in with a dead body. Someone gave them treats or something. Look." James followed her pointing finger to several empty dog treat wrappers scattered near the kennel door. "Someone who knew the animals," James mused. "Someone they trusted." Back at the station, Detective Laura Simmons was reviewing the preliminary reports when James arrived. At 43, Laura had seen more than her share of small-town violence, but something about this one bothered her. "The text message is interesting," she said, sliding Dennis's phone across the desk in its evidence bag. "Half-written, sent to no one. She knows about the thing with. And then nothing. Sent at 10:17 p.m. The animal control officer spoke with some volunteers," James added. "A woman named Samantha Reese was supposedly the last person to see him alive. She's been volunteering there for about 2 months. "Let's bring her in," Laura said. Samantha Reese arrived at the station at 2:15 p.m. She was younger than Laura had expected, late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and shadows under her eyes that suggested little sleep. Her hands were rough from manual labor, nails cut short. "I already told the officer everything," Samantha said as she sat across from Laura in the interview room. Her voice was steady, but her fingers tapped rhythmically against her thigh. "I left at 9 last night after cleaning the stalls. Dennis was still there, doing paperwork in the office. Did he mention expecting anyone? Laura asked. No, Samantha replied, then hesitated. Well, he got a call while I was leaving. Seemed agitated afterward. Said something about dealing with old business but didn't elaborate. You used the grain scoop regularly? Samantha nodded. Every day. For the feed. Where was it kept? Tool shed, usually. Sometimes Dennis would leave it in the kennel building if he was in a hurry. Laura studied Samantha's face. There was something guarded in her expression, something beyond the normal nervousness of a witness. How did you come to volunteer at Fox Hollow? A flicker of something, alarm, crossed Samantha's face before she composed herself. I love animals. Saw they needed help. Simple as that. But it wasn't simple. A search of Samantha's small apartment later that day revealed a shoebox hidden in her closet. Inside was a torn photograph of a young girl with bite marks on her arms, a printed email thread between Dennis and someone identified only as T, and a handwritten journal entry that read, "He thinks it's buried. It's not." The photograph was old, at least 15 years. The girl's face was partially torn away, but what remained looked strikingly like a younger version of Samantha. Pull everything you can find on Samantha Reese, Laura instructed James. And Dennis Maurer. I want to know if their paths crossed before 2 months ago. The county records office yielded nothing under Samantha Reese, but a deeper search revealed that she had changed her name 6 years earlier. She had been born Samantha Taylor. And 15 years ago, a 12-year-old Samantha Taylor had briefly been placed in emergency foster care at a property in Sullivan County, Fox Hollow Rescue Farm. When confronted with this information, Samantha's composure finally cracked. You don't understand, she said, voice trembling. That place wasn't just a rescue for animals. Dennis took in kids too, unofficial fosters. Girls, mostly. Some through proper channels, some not. He told the neighbors we were relatives or volunteers. Why did you go back there? Laura asked quietly. Samantha's eyes hardened. To find proof. I wasn't the only one. There were others, at least 5 that I knew of. Dennis used the rescue as a shield. People saw what they wanted to see, a kind old man helping unwanted animals. What happened the night Dennis died, Samantha? I confronted him, she admitted. Told him I remembered everything. He got angry, said I couldn't prove anything, that nobody would believe me. Said it was all buried. When I turned to leave, he grabbed the grain scoop and came at me. We struggled. I pushed him away and ran. But the forensic evidence didn't fully support her story. Dennis had been struck twice from behind. There were no defensive wounds on his hands. Why lock the kennel door and chain it from outside? Laura pressed. I panicked, Samantha said. I thought, if it looked like someone broke in. The case went to trial 3 months later, but the jury deadlocked. 7 believed Samantha's claim of self-defense despite the timeline inconsistencies, 5 weren't convinced. The district attorney declined to retry the case pending further investigation, citing insufficient evidence. Samantha disappeared from Sullivan County afterward. Some said she moved to Oregon, others swore they'd seen her in Nashville. The rescue farm closed, its animals distributed to other shelters. Laura couldn't let it go. In her 20 years on the force, no case had nagged at her quite like Fox Hollow. She kept returning to the photograph of the girl with the bite marks, to the cryptic journal entry. He thinks it's buried. It's not. In spring 2017, Laura obtained permission to search the Fox Hollow property, now abandoned and overgrown. For 2 days, she and a small team combed the 15 acres, focusing on areas where the ground showed signs of previous disturbance. They found nothing until, on the second afternoon, one of the cadaver dogs became agitated near an old tool shed behind the kennel building. The structure was small, maybe 8 by 10 feet, with a dirt floor partially covered by rotting plywood. When they pulled up the plywood, they discovered it wasn't a floor at all, but a covering. Beneath it was a small dugout room, no larger than a closet. The walls were lined with foam insulation. There was a mattress, a battery-powered lamp, and a collection of collars, small leather ones, no tags. "My God," James whispered as they photographed the hidden space. "He kept them here." But there were no bodies, no bones. Whatever evidence might have existed had been removed long ago. Or so they thought. In late 2019, the local news station received an anonymous package containing a USB drive. The return address was a hotel in Knoxville. On it were scanned intake forms for short-term fosters, never reported to the state, hidden camera footage of Dennis screaming at a teenage girl, and a voice memo labeled, "They always go quiet when it's dark." The footage was turned over to the police, and the case status changed to under review. Laura spent hours watching the videos, matching faces to names, creating a timeline of girls who had passed through Fox Hollow. 5 girls between 2000 and 2015. All vulnerable. All without strong family connections. All placed there through unofficial channels, friends of friends, church connections, desperate parents who couldn't cope. And Samantha had been one of them. The voice memo contained only breathing and the distant sound of dogs barking for almost 2 minutes. Then Dennis's voice, "They always go quiet when it's dark. Always. You just have to wait them out." What happened in that tool shed? What had Samantha and the others endured? The remains of Fox Hollow deteriorated with each passing season. The kennel building's roof partially collapsed after a heavy snow in 2020. The farmhouse was vandalized, its windows broken, walls spray-painted with crude images. But still, once a month, someone left a small leather collar at the gate. Always the same kind, plain leather, sized for a small neck, no tags. Local teenagers made the property part of their folklore. They claimed the rescue dogs still barked violently when they passed the tool shed, even years after the animals had been rehomed. They swore they could hear crying at night if they got close enough to the property line. Laura knew better than to believe ghost stories. But she did believe in justice long delayed. In May 2022, exactly 7 years after Dennis's death, Laura received a letter postmarked from Seattle. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address and 3 words, "We're all here." The address led to a women's support group that met every Tuesday evening in a church basement. And there, Laura found them, 4 women, now in their 20s and 30s, who had all spent time at Fox Hollow. They had found each other online, drawn together by shared nightmares and the same mission, to be believed. "We called ourselves the Collar Girls," one of them explained. "It was our way of taking back what he tried to make shameful." They described the isolation, the threats, the punishments in the shed. They described Dennis's careful manipulation of the community's perception, how he cultivated his image as a savior of unwanted creatures. "But what about Samantha?" Laura asked. "Did she kill him?" The women exchanged glances. "Samantha was the brave one," the oldest said finally. "She went back to force him to confess. She had a recorder with her that night. She never meant for it to end in violence." "But it did," Laura said. "It did," the woman agreed. "But not the way you think." She placed a small digital recorder on the table between them. "This is what Samantha recorded that night. We've been holding it until we were ready." Laura pressed play, and Dennis Mauer's voice filled the room, first angry, then mocking as he confronted Samantha. Then a third voice, male, younger, interjected. "That's enough, Dad." The recording captured a struggle, shouting, the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Then silence, broken only by ragged breathing and the whining of dogs. "Timmy," Dennis gasped. "Why?" "You know why," the younger voice replied. "I've always known what you did to them." Laura stared at the recorder. "Timothy Mauer? Dennis's son?" The women nodded. "He was the groundskeeper. lived in a cottage on the property. He knew what his father was doing but was too afraid to stop it directly. He helped us when he could, extra food, unlocked doors. After Samantha confronted Dennis that night, Tim stepped in when Dennis became violent. And Samantha took the blame, Laura said, understanding dawning. Why? Because Tim was the only one who'd ever shown us kindness, another woman explained. And because he promised to help us all come forward, to make sure the truth came out, even if it took years. The collars at the gate, Laura said. That was him. That was all of us, taking turns, the first woman said. Reminders that we wouldn't stay buried, wouldn't stay quiet. Even in the dark. Laura left Seattle with more questions than answers. Where was Timothy Maurer now? Why had it taken 7 years for the women to come forward together? And most importantly, where was Samantha? The kennel building at Fox Hollow has since been demolished, the property sold to a developer planning luxury homes. The tool shed remained standing during Laura's last visit, a silent sentinel to secrets not fully revealed. The case officially remains, under review, the evidence insufficient for new charges against anyone. Timothy Maurer was never located for questioning. Samantha Reese's whereabouts remain unknown. But once a month, despite the no trespassing signs and security cameras, despite the freshly graded roads and construction equipment, someone still leaves a small leather collar at what used to be the gate. No tags. No identification. Just a reminder that some stories refuse to stay buried. And late at night, neighbors swear they can hear dogs barking near where the tool shed once stood, even though there hasn't been a dog on that property for years.